Rain pressed softly against the windows, a whispering lullaby that should have been calming. But for Thomas, the sound only scraped his nerves raw. The new house was too quiet, too still, as if it held its breath the moment he walked through the door. He didn't want to move here. None of them did. But after the divorce, after the shouting matches and the sleepless nights, the house his aunt left him in her will seem like a gift from nowhere. Nestled in a sleepy village on the edge of the moors, it was supposed to be a fresh start, a quiet place for him and his daughter, Elsie. The place was old, its beams groaning with age, its rooms stubborn with shadows. Every corner seemed to remember things better left forgotten. He told himself it was just unfamiliarity. The mind plays tricks when it wants to feel safe. And still, at night, lying awake with the wind threading through the eaves, he began to dread the silence that it started with the voice. Soft, barely audible. He thought it was Elsie at first, calling for him from a room down the hall. "Daddy," she would whisper, but when he got there, she was always asleep, curled up under a blanket, peaceful, undisturbed. The voice wasn't every night, just sometimes, enough to convince him he wasn't losing his mind yet. The first time he told himself it was a dream. The second time, maybe a memory. But the third time, he stood in the hallway long after checking on her, staring at the door of the empty guest room at the end, because that's where it came from. Thomas, so soft, almost tender. A woman's voice, faint and unfamiliar. He froze. For a long second, he did nothing, just listened. But the house had swallowed the voice as if it had never been there. The guest room was empty, still half-packed, boxes stacked in corners, dust untouched on the windowsill. He flicked on the light. Everything was in place. He checked the window, locked. No signs of intrusion. But the whisper remained, echoing behind his eyes. Thomas didn't sleep that night. He lay awake, eyes wide in the dark, listening to the sigh of the house, the shifting of the beams, the murmur of rain. It was irrational, he knew. He was tired, fragile, maybe. The weight of the last few months still gnawed at him, grief, guilt, exhaustion all bundled into one dull ache. And yet, the voice knew his name. The next morning, he asked Elsie if she'd heard anything strange. She looked up from her cereal, blinking. Like what? Anything. Like someone talking. Or your name being called. She tilted her head. "I heard someone say yours last night," she said matter-of-factly. "I thought it was you talking on the phone." Thomas swallowed. "What did you hear?" She shrugged. "Just a whisper. From the end of the hall." He almost dropped his mug. The day passed in slow motion. He couldn't focus. His hands trembled when he unpacked books in the study. He caught himself checking the hallway every few minutes, as if expecting to see someone standing there. That night, he left the guest room door open. Nothing happened until past midnight. He had finally dozed off on the couch when he heard it again. Clearer now, closer. "Thomas." He sat up. The voice was coming from the guest room. But this time, it wasn't a whispered "it" was a breath. Drawn close to his ear, he turned sharply. No one there. The air was colder, much colder. For the first time in years, Thomas locked his own bedroom door. It felt absurd, childlike, like hiding under a blanket from monsters that weren't real. And yet, when the lock clicked into place, a knot in his stomach loosened just a little. Elsie slept through it all, untouched by the house's unease. In the mornings, she chattered about the birds outside her window, the strange, crooked trees in the backyard. Innocent things, normal things. Thomas envied her. He told himself he wouldn't let the house get to him. He had a daughter to protect, a life to rebuild. Still, he found excuses not to go near the guest room. When he passed it, he kept his gaze forward, shoulders tight. He wouldn't admit it to himself, but something about that room felt wrong. as if the air was thicker there, harder to breathe. 3 days passed without incident. He started to believe it had been stress after all. Lack of sleep, a trick of the ear. He even laughed a little at himself when he told Elsie they should finally set up her playroom and clear out the guest space. It was late afternoon when he pushed open the door. Dust motes spun lazily in a shaft of pale light cutting through the window. The boxes were untouched, same as he had left them. For a moment, the room seemed perfectly ordinary. Stale and used, but ordinary. Then he noticed I could see the center of the room. Someone had drawn something onto the wooden floor. It was faint, just the barest trace as if scratched in dust with a fingertip. A circle broken by jagged lines. Looping and crossing at unnatural angles, he knelt down, heart thudding against his ribs. It hadn't been there before. He would have seen it. Thomas wiped his palm across the floor. The dust smudged easily, but the faint carving remained, gouged into the wood itself. A sharp knock behind him made him jolt upright. He spun around, pulse hammering. The door had closed, and standing on the other side, he heard it, her, whispering his name, closer this time. Urgent. Thomas. Thomas. He grasped the doorknob and yanked. It didn't budge. Another whisper, right at the keyhole. Please. His skin crawled. Every primitive instinct screamed at him to run, to flee, but the door would not open. He kicked it, slammed his shoulder against it. Wood groaned but held. Elsie, he shouted. Silence. Elsie. He heard her small feet pounding down the hall. Her muffled voice, terrified. Daddy. The door gave way suddenly, almost throwing him backward. Elsie stood there, her face pale, her hands trembling. Daddy, what's wrong? I heard you yelling. Thomas grabbed her, holding her so tightly she squeaked in protest. His heart hammered in his throat. The room behind him sat still and empty again, the strange markings blurred and half erased by his frantic movements. He didn't realize he was crying until Elsie touched his cheek. Later that night, after she was asleep, Thomas stood alone in the hallway, staring at the guest room door. It remained open, as he had left it. A low, cold draft brushed his ankles, though all the windows were shut. He could leave, he thought. He could pack a bag, drive away, find a cheap motel. No one would blame him. But then he remembered the tired set of Elsie's shoulders, the way her small hand had clutched his in the dark. He couldn't run. Not yet. As he turned to go back to his room, he heard it again, clearer, undeniable, a soft, urgent whisper from behind him, inside the guest room. Come back, Thomas. He didn't look. He didn't dare. Thomas started sleeping with the hallway light on. He told Elsie it was for her, that big old houses had their creaks and moans, but deep down he knew the truth. It wasn't the darkness he feared. It was what waited inside the silence. He packed the guest room door with old furniture, an armchair, a set of boxes, anything heavy enough to jam it shut. It made him feel foolish, stacking barricades like a man for some ghost story. But it gave him a fragile peace. For a few nights, nothing happened. Then the dreams began. They were sharp and vivid, like memories he never lived. Always the same. A woman standing at the edge of the moors, her face turned away, hair tangled by the wind. She would whisper his name, her voice raw with something between longing and rage. But when Thomas tried to move toward her, his feet sank into the black earth, pulling him down, while the sky above turned a sickly, unnatural gray. Each time he woke up gasping, his throat dry, the taste of dirt in his mouth. That on the fourth night, it changed. He was standing in the hallway, staring at the guest room door. In the dream, the barricade was gone. The door stood open a crack, breathing darkness. From inside, a child's voice called out, Daddy, Daddy, help me. Thomas bolted upright in bed, heart clawing at his chest. It was only a dream. Only, he heard it again. Awake now, clear as daylight, Daddy, Elsie's voice. Weak, frightened, coming from the guest room. Thomas stumbled from bed, adrenaline roaring through him. He crashed into the hallway, the world tilting around him. The barricade was still there, piled high. The door was still jammed. And yet, Daddy, please, Elsie's voice, thin and desperate. Thomas didn't think. He grabbed the armchair, yanking it aside. Boxes toppled. The door creaked open under his shaking hand. Inside, only darkness. And then movement. In the far corner, a shape shifting out of the shadows. That it was her. Elsie, or something wearing her shape. Small, frail, dressed in her favorite yellow nightgown, her hair falling across her face. She stood there, trembling. Thomas took a step forward, heart tearing in his chest. "Sweetheart," he whispered. His voice cracked on the word. The figure lifted its head. The face was wrong, too pale. Lips blue, eyes wide and unseeing, mouth hanging open as if caught in a scream that made no sound. And then it smiled. Not a child's smile. Not Elsie's smile. Something ancient twisted her features. Something that didn't know how to wear a human face. Thomas stumbled back. His spine slammed against the doorframe. Behind him, he heard another sound. Small footsteps pounding toward him. Daddy. The real Elsie. He turned just as she threw herself into his arms, sobbing into his chest. "Daddy, I woke up and you weren't there. What's happening?" He clutched her, pulling her away from the open doorway. When he dared look back, the figure was gone. The room was empty. Only the faint smell of damp earth lingered, curling into the hallway like a living thing. Thomas kicked the door shut and locked it. He didn't let go of Elsie for a long, long time. Later, as she drifted back to sleep in his bed, her small body pressed against his, she mumbled something against his chest. "They're lonely," she said. "They miss you." Thomas lay awake until dawn, staring at the crack in the ceiling, while the house around him breathed and shifted, alive in a way he no longer dared to explain. Morning came, but the house did not feel lighter. The sun stretched across the floorboards like old scars, barely warming the chilled air. Thomas moved through the rooms like a man condemned. Every creak beneath his steps a reminder that he was not alone here. Not really. Elsie played in the living room, her dolls scattered in a neat little circle, whispering secrets he couldn't hear. She seemed better, less afraid, as if whatever darkness had pressed its face to theirs last night had forgotten her, or perhaps lost interest. Thomas wasn't so lucky. The whispers grew bolder with every hour. He heard them through the walls, soft and sibilant, like someone breathing through broken glass. They spoke in a language he didn't understand, but sometimes, just sometimes, his name would bubble up between the sounds. Thomas. Home. Ours. By midday, he had made up his mind. They had to leave. Now, he stuffed clothes into bags without folding them, his hands clumsy with panic. He told Elsie it was a surprise trip, an adventure. She beamed and clapped, unaware of the urgency twitching behind his smile. The house didn't want them to leave. As he wrestled the front door open, a gust of frigid air slammed it shut again, nearly crushing his fingers. The lights flickered, humming a high, painful note. The walls seemed to breathe inward, like a lung preparing to scream. Elsie shrieked. Thomas spun around. She was pointing down the hallway, toward the guest room. The door, jammed and locked, was standing wide open. Inside, the shadows churned, thick and alive. A shape waited there. Not the false Elsie this time, but something taller. Something wearing the memory of a woman. Long hair tangled over a hollow face, eyes empty wells of hunger. And she whispered, "You belong here." Thomas grabbed Elsie, shielding her with his body. His heart thundered so loud it drowned out everything else. The woman, no, the thing, stepped forward, dragging the dark with her like a cloak. The wooden floor beneath her blackened and cracked. Every instinct screamed, "Run." He turned, yanking the door open with a howl of rage, and the wind outside shrieked in kind, pulling at him, fighting him. "Stay!" A hand brushed his shoulder, cold and wet and boneless. He didn't look. He didn't have to. With a roar, he plunged through the doorway. Elsie clutched against him. They tumbled onto the front steps as the door slammed shut behind them with a final, shuddering boom. The house fell silent. They ran to the car without looking back. Thomas jammed the keys into the ignition, hands slick with sweat. The engine coughed, sputtered, "No, come on," it caught. As he pulled away, tires screaming against the gravel, Elsie twisted in her seat, peering back through the rear window. Thomas didn't have to ask what she saw. In the upstairs window, the one belonging to the guest room, a figure watched them go. Motionless, patient, waiting, they didn't go back. Thomas sold the house through a lawyer, sight unseen. He burned every photo of it he could find, tore up the deed with shaking hands. But some nights, when the rain pressed against the new apartment's windows and the world fell too quiet, he swore he heard it again. A whisper, soft, persistent, calling his name from the dark. Years passed. Elsie grew up, laughing, forgetting, as only children can. Sometimes she asked about the house, but the questions became fewer, and then they stopped altogether. Thomas learned to live with the silence that he changed cities, changed jobs, changed everything. He learned to sleep without the hallway light on. He told himself it had only been imagination, stress, old fear curling at the edges of a broken life that he almost believed it. Almost point one autumn evening, he stayed late at work. The office emptied out. Beyond the windows, the city swam in mist, and streetlights bled pale reflections onto the glass. He shut down his computer, shrugged on his coat, and reached for the door. That's when he heard it, a whisper, soft, intimate. Asterisk Thomas. Asterisk, he froze, hand trembling on the doorknob. The whisper was too close. Right behind him. Asterisk, we found you. Asterisk in the reflection of the window. He saw her, the woman from the house. Only now, her face was clear, and she was smiling. Wide, too wide, as if she had never really left, as if she had only been waiting. And Thomas understood, some places don't stay behind. They move with you, inside you, whispering in the dark until you finally answer.